or finishing it off, because I think I've done the majority of it, but I kind of, every time I go back to it, I think, oh, because you said that you liked what I'd done. That was like a green light for me to just keep doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I loved it. Like, I loved that.
I just
absolutely loved it.
But yeah, it's sounding great. It's really good.
Cool.
So, yeah.
All right. So before we dig into that, talk more about that, I would like to do like a quick introduction in Arabic about you guys. And then I'll pass it back to you, and you can tell me a little bit more about yourself, and we'll dig into like the whole production music and, you know, how artists can benefit from it.
What's happening about the video, Abed? Are you going to play that, or have people already seen that?
Oh no, like it's been played a lot. Yeah, people like saw it. Yeah, and like the feedback that we got for that video is absolutely insane. People absolutely loved it.
Oh, really?
Like mad editing skills.
That's
been a learning curve, because we only started doing editing on videos. So yeah. Oh,
all right. So اوكي، مرحبا بالجميع. مرحبا نور، مرحبا رفيق، حسن، وكل اللي عم بيشوفونا على الفيسبوك. الويبينار هاي الجمعة راح يكون عن production music libraries. مارتن واندي صاروا يشتغلوا مع بعض 26 سنة. بهاي الفترة كتبوا أكثر من 1500 مقطوعة موسيقية. كتبوا موسيقى لأفلام كبيرة زي توي ستوري، فايندينج نيمو، ذا مابيتس، وكمان كثير أفلام، برامج تلفزيون، دعايات، كثير أشياء تانية. هذا الويبينار كثير كان مهم لإلي إنه ينعمل، لأنه أنا كمان يعني بهذا المجال، وكفنان اللي بكتب موسيقى و برودوس ميوزك زي كتير من اللي عم بيحضرونا. بعرف انه في كتير فنانين اللي بيعرفوش عن هذا المجال، وبيعرفوش قديش هذا المجال ممكن يكون انه يجيب مدخول كتير منيح للفنانين. وبفكر انه هاي يعني انه هذا من اهم الويبينارز اللي راح تنعمل ب PMX. فشكرا انكم انضمتوا لنا. اذا في عندكم اي سؤال اكتبوا هون او بالفيسبوك ونبلش. بحول إشي مارتن واندي وهن بيحكوا عن الموضوع. رح يكون الحكي بالإنجليزي، بس إذا في حدا عنده أي سؤال ما فهمش أي إشي يسألنا. الميوزك لايبراريز هي عمليا موسيقى اللي أنت بتكتبها وبتطلعها عن طريق عدة شركات. في مليون شركات اللي بتدور على موسيقى كل يوم من الشكل، وهن بحطوا هاي الموسيقى بأفلام وبرامج تلفزيون وهيك. بس إسا بنفوت على أكثر تفاصيل. نبلش. Okay, so I did like a quick introduction. The good thing, you can't know if I said good or bad things about you guys, so that's cool.
I noticed that Martin was nodding slightly then.
Yeah,
I had no idea what he was understanding in that.
I knew the word. I knew shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew that.
So yeah, let's start. Just tell us, like, people saw the video, so they probably know all about you. Just like a quick introduction for the people who didn't have the chance to see the video. Actually, I tried to play it before, but the audio and the streaming didn't work. So.
That was his editing. That was how it was.
So yeah, let's start.
So I'm Martin. Hi everybody. If you're, it's a bit odd here because all we can see is Abed, so there could be one person out there, and there could be a million, but I suspect it's probably closer to one. But however many of you there, thanks for tuning in, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. And so this is Andy, and we've been partners writing music for, I think it's about 33 years now, and just starting as hobbyists and then working up, sort of just climbing a slippery slope really, and grabbing everything we could, never saying no to anything. And after about 5 or 6 years, it turned into a sort of a small income and a living. And probably after about 10 years, it turned into a full-time living, and which is great, because when it's a full-time living, you create more time for yourself, to create more music, to create more money, to create more income to create more time. It's a good circle rather than a vicious circle. And so for the last probably 25 years, we've been full-time musicians. I think we're probably slightly unique in that we work exclusively together in our professional music, in our composition. We always work together, and we only work together. That's not anything we've really ever discussed. It's just something that's happened. And yeah, we've managed to kind of trick people into using us for 25, 30 years, and we're still here. It feels like we're kind of clinging on by our fingernails sometimes because it's an uncertain world, but we're still here. And I think we've surprised ourselves that we've managed to do this for so long and make an income out of what effectively is a very nice hobby. And we are kind of just living proof that it can be done. And you know, it's a pleasure to be able to kind of share any of our experiences. I don't know how useful it will be, but we're very happy to answer any questions that you have.
Amazing. Thank you guys for being here. It's honestly an honor to talk to you. All right, so the first thing, so people in Palestine and in general musicians in the Middle East don't know anything about production music, or as was called library music. So I would like, if you can tell us, it's a big subject, but if you can tell us like in a couple of words about like what it is. And
yeah, so production music is traditionally it was instrumental music it's written and produced specifically for use on TV, film, I mean all media now obviously, but traditionally it was, you know, originally TV and film. It's pre-licensed, so it's ready to go for any users. So a TV producer can say, I need a piece of music to go with my footage. I'll have a look at this music library. Here's a tune I like, and he can just use it. He doesn't have to contact the publisher. He just fills in a cue sheet which says, this is the piece of music I've used this duration, and this is where it'll be broadcast. And then royalties come back, and that's kind of how it's always worked. I have to say it's getting much more complicated with all the online stuff, but basically it's the same principle. I think one of the sort of main changes that has happened over the years is that there are many more tunes now that are songs with lyrics and vocals and things on, as well as just instrumental music. All genres are covered, and it's a massive industry that, you know, there are thousands and thousands, if not millions of tracks out there. So competition is high, but, you know, it is a good income if you kind of work hard at it. So.
It is just worth pointing out, in case there are any TV producers watching, that you do have to be registered with the publisher to use the tracks. So it's not that you don't have to have any permission, you do register, but once you're registered with a publisher like Universal, then yes, it's carte blanche as long as you actually register the tracks that you've used. I think it's worth pointing out, because maybe not so much now, but perhaps up to about 10 years ago, I think there was perhaps an idea that library music, and if anyone's confused, library music and production music are exactly the same thing. It's just, it used to be called library music. I think maybe there was a connotations that it was played in libraries, so people started using the word production music, but it's the same thing. But there was a general feeling, especially, you know, for us, when we mentioned we did production music or library music, and there's a slight sort of looking down your nose, thinking, oh, it's just lift music, it's background music, it's musical wallpaper. And if you listen to any of the libraries, it's anything but. The production values are right up there with, you know, the top artists. And that's partly due to the fact that good equipment is very affordable now, but it is certainly not a poor relation. And also in terms of income, there are library writers that are making serious money out of it. And I keep saying this as an example, but you know, there are some famous film composers. I won't name them because they might not like it publicized, but there are some famous film composers. People are doing Hollywood blockbusters, that household names in the film business, and they are passing tracks onto libraries that maybe they're not used in films, or they're filling downtime. So it's definitely not a poor relation. I know that some of the American libraries actually sign up chart bands to write for them. So it's high quality stuff. Maybe we're the exception, I don't know, but So, and the other thing, if anyone's still unclear, it's like the musical version of Shutterstock. So it's like a photo stock library, but with music. And the reason library music actually came about was because an awful lot of television doesn't have the budget to have commissioned music in it. So rather than paying maybe thousands of pounds to score a program, it's a cheaper alternative. You can license music, and you can license it depending on where it's being broadcast. So you can get a worldwide license or just one territory license. So it's quite flexible, and it's very quick for people making TV programs. And evidently, by the amount of library companies there, and they're obviously doing well. It can be a lucrative business to be in.
Yeah.
I know Chuck D has an album or two in I think it was, I don't remember which library. I know that also Serge Tankayan from System of a Down has a production music album also. And there's absolutely a lot of A-list artists who does that too.
Robbie Robertson's song writes for the Universal, and
but there's a sort of general lesson there, isn't there, really, that really to make a living in music, and I think particularly nowadays, you have to be looking at opportunities all over the place. You can't rely on, someone who's kind of in the charts now, more than likely in 10 years isn't going to be. So, they've got to be thinking ahead. If you want a career that's got longevity to it, that's going to last your working career, you need to be looking around for different ways of making money from your music. And production music is a great thing that can run in the background at whatever level you want it to a certain extent. Obviously it's dependent on the publishers, but we for example, we were writing production music. That was the main thing we did to start with, which was great. It got us going. It led on, as I said in the video for anyone who's seen it, it led on to TV producers getting in touch with us. They'd heard our library tracks, so we like that. Can you write us something? So that then started us off on work that was actually commissioned rather than library work. That we got pretty busy with that, and throughout our career, that's been probably for the most of the time what's kept us pretty busy. But the library music, the production music, is always there underneath. It fills any gaps. If we haven't got commissioned work, we can start writing some library tracks ready for for release. And it also has there's a kind of base income that you're earning from the production music as well. If you haven't written a lot of it, it's not massive, but it's there all the time. So I mean, the whole COVID thing has been a really good example of where that is such a bonus. You've got this steady stream that's coming in regardless of if you were a jobbing musician, gigs that were cancelled, that it must have been devastating for a huge area in the music business. But the library music just has this steady.
I think the other thing, again, it may be clear, but just to reinforce it, is that library music is a sort of slow and steady thing. So if you've got a track and it earns £100 a year, you might be very disappointed after the first year. But if it does that for 20 years and it only took you 2 days to do, well, that's a very profitable 2 days. Now, it may go the other way. It may run for 20 years and only make you £50, and then it's obviously not been a good use of your time. But we feel with the volume of music that we've written over the time, it's a bit like buying raffle tickets. The more you have, the more you have the chance of winning, and it sort of evens up. You get some unusually lucrative tracks and then some rather disappointing ones, and it all sort of tends to blur out in the wash. But you have to be very clear, it's not a get rich scheme by any means, but it's a kind of slow and steady, almost like a pension thing that just sort of dribbles away.
I mean, having said that, there are writers who have made really good money from it. So it can be a get rich scheme.
And there are people, just with you saying again about our balance, there are definitely writers that do mainly commissioned work and then just a little bit of library. There are people that do 50-50, and then there are people who don't do any commissioned work at all, and it's just all library. So you can make a living out of it.
Exactly. And it's the perfect way where you can that I would like. I think the downside of it that you don't see the money immediately. It usually takes some time to start seeing the income.
Yeah. And it does take a while. I mean, if you think of that, so if you write a piece of music, and this is very rough, but if you write a piece of music, then you would realistically only expect it to go out 6 months afterwards, because it's got to fit into your publisher's release schedule. It's probably going to be another 6 months before a significant body of people have actually stumbled across the track. Mm-hmm. It might be 6 months before they feel, well, I'll use that track in something. 6 months before it's reported to the PRS or your whatever, your collection society. Another 6 months before they, I think I'm up to about 3 years at the moment, but you know, it can be that long. So it is a long cycle, and we definitely have had experience of other writers who we've kind of collaborated with, or not so much collaborated, but we've kind of recommended them, and they've had music out, and after 12 months, because they haven't seen any significant money, they've stopped, and they go, oh, that's a waste of time. And of course, then 2 or 3 years later, they suddenly get a check for £300 or £400, and they go, oh, actually. But then they've stopped, and they've lost the momentum. So
and then
and I think I'm very grateful to Andy, because when we started out, Andy had a bit more knowledge about this than me, and I was quite fed up, going, no, this just isn't paying. And he said, no, slow and steady, you know, just be patient. You've got to wait for these things. And rather than, we always use the analogy that rather than borrow money from a bank like most businesses, we borrowed time from ourselves. So we didn't invest money in the business, we invested our time.
I love it.
And it worked out eventually.
Yeah, and it can be quite unnerving, because, you know, 2 years down the line, if you're not seeing significant money coming in, it does feel, have I wasted that time? But in our experience, and you know, chatting to loads and loads of other library production music writers, everyone has the same experience. And I think there's a kind of general 3-year rule that people kind of, you know, if they've stuck with it for 3 years, at the 3-year point, you know, it is beginning to earn you decent money at that stage. So
or not.
You've totally wasted 3 years.
Should have been. I mean,
the point is, you know, you can be doing it while you're doing all the other things that you would normally do with your music. You know, it's not like it's going to take up your entire, you know, working week. You can fit it in, and you know, I mean, we were both working in full-time jobs when we started writing production music, and we just worked in the evenings writing the music. We got together in evenings, and we just, you know, invested that time.
I mean, if you're lucky enough to be fully occupied doing commissioned work, then you won't need to be doing library, and well done. But very few musicians are fully occupied with writing. So when you're not, or rather when you're not occupied with commissions, do some library rather than sit around doing nothing. That's what we figured.
Well, usually the process with musicians is like when you write a track or when you produce music, not everything you produce, you release it. Like you would be your own, you know, your best commercial release. You can also, like, all those tracks that you're not sure about them, like, how do you feel about them? You can take those tracks, finish those tracks, put it in an album, and sell that album. And
by no means is that a kind of a suggestion that it's inferior or kind of, you know, it's just my kind of throwaway stuff that wasn't good enough elsewhere. Not at all. We all know that having done a lot of commissioned work, we've written countless tracks that we knew were very good, but the producer
didn't.
Well, or that they weren't right. I mean, they might have said they were rubbish, or they might have said they were just not right for the job. And a lot of the time they're just not right, but we know they're good enough, so they've gone out as library.
Everything gets recycled. We invented recycling, but it was with music rather than plastic.
Nice. Again, it's like, I think this is the artist's best option for like passive income.
I think it's a good way of looking at it.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions already. Let's dive in. How does artists with no experience in this start writes for music libraries?
So, well, I think the first thing I'd do is I would log on to, say, the Universal production music website and take a look at the sort of music that's on there and kind of figure out the way that it's laid out in terms of a piece of music. So, you know, is it like a song, or does it progress without a kind of verse, chorus, whatever layout? Just kind of check out how it works. And once you've kind of think you've got a handle on that, then obviously have a go at writing something, and that it's good to play it against stuff that's on TV as well.
Yeah.
You know, if you if something that you enjoyed watching on telly, you like the music for, try rewriting a piece of production music that would sit under that, then you find that there are certain kind of cut points and lulls and things in the music that you write that will work with it. Other things won't work, and you can kind of hone your skills like that. And then obviously, if you're at that stage happy with what you're doing, then start approaching library music companies, and you know, just are they taking people on? You know, send them tracks.
Yeah.
Universal has a submissions kind of
most publishers now,
yeah, most of them do. Sorry, I'm only saying Universal because that's where most of our experience.
I should just say, you don't actually have to log on or register with any of the libraries. That you can just listen to the tracks. You can't download them.
You can audition everything.
But you can audition everything and just listen. One thing I think is worth pointing out is that, again, library when it started was, well, my understanding was it was much more kind of just background. It was less designed to be featured. But nowadays, as we said earlier, you get stuff with vocals on. So there is the whole range. You will get stuff that's very ambient with not an awful lot going on, which is incredibly useful. But at the other end, you might have something that's incredibly thematic or catchy with very, very prominent lines. So you really have to listen to quite a few different albums and see the range. But I think Andy's absolutely right. You know, get a piece of footage and write to that and see what works and see what doesn't. Yeah.
And do you feel there's a difference when you write for libraries and write for film and TV, or write for commercial music? Like, what's...
I think it's probably, in a way, it's quite similar because you've got the range. I mean, if we're doing, I should say we do an awful lot of kids' music, not something we ever chose to do. We've sort of ended up being dragged down that route, and it's been great fun. But that means a lot of the stuff we do is very thematic. Because the very nature of a theme tune is it's a call to arms. You need to get people in. It's an alert, so it has to be very thematic and very catchy. But then within programs, you're writing stuff that's not so thematic. That's, you know, not fighting with dialogue or fighting with sound effects. So I think in a way it's pretty similar, really. I mean, you have to, you know, you look at all different genres and well, different intensities as well. And like I said earlier, you know, production music is a substitute in a lot of cases for people not having the budget to commission music. So it's trying to recreate that commission music. So some of it will be thematic and some of it will be more underscore based. And I should say, if anyone's unaware of this, that if you look on any library publisher's website and listen to tracks, you'll get a full version and then there'll be an underscore version. And nowadays, almost all tracks would have stems. So, you know, a variety of different instrument stems so people can layer up their own instrument combinations. So yeah, it's a pretty flexible business nowadays.
I have another question on Facebook that says, is this the type of business where you just put your work in libraries and wish for the best, or there's tools and method for marketing?
It's really up to the library.
It's the publisher who deals with I mean, to a certain extent, it is the luck of the draw, because, you know, you are part of a massive library, and in most cases, I think most of the libraries now are big libraries. The smaller ones have kind of been swallowed up by bigger ones. So yeah, so there is an element of luck. The publisher deals with the marketing, and they, you know, they have pretty significant marketing teams worldwide. I'm always surprised when we get a piece of music published with the library, when you look at your royalty sheets, and, you know, there might not be massive incomes, but there are a lot of uses worldwide. And so, you know, if you're in with a library that's big enough, which most of them are, to be honest with you, then your work will get picked up. So it is the luck of the draw, but you know, the odds seem quite good.
I mean, I certainly historically as composers, we would have never done any marketing with our library music. We would have left that to the publisher. Having said that, for the vast majority of our career, there hasn't been social media, but now there is social media. I don't know. I'm guessing some composers will do some of their own marketing. Some will just leave it to the publishers.
That's a very good point, actually, because I follow quite a few composers on Instagram, and they definitely do push their own work, and some of them have significant followings as well. I mean, I like everything nowadays, you kind of have to fight for every little bit you can, and the more you do, the more you get yourself out there, the better it is, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
There is definitely a bit of put it out there and hope for the best, because you know, you can't, once it's out there, it's a bit out of your hands, and you do have to hope tracks get picked up. And I should say that, you know, we've had tracks that for no apparent reason have been quite successful, and other tracks that you think, oh, that's great, that's really going to hit the mark, and they seem to just not really do much. And it's quite hard to work out why some tracks just catch people's imagination.
It's impossible to predict, and we've, in the past, where we've had a successful track, we've then tried to kind of mimic it afterwards. Total failure. It never works. You know, you can't predict the success, and you also can't kind of mimic it. And it's the same if you're listening to, you know, if you're trying to write, you know, stuff that's very current, and you're listening to the charts or whatever, to imitate that music and kind of imitate its success is really difficult.
It's impossible.
I find it quite a good way of kind of getting you started on a track, but at the end of the day, you need to steer your own course. Well, you know,
don't let the track take its own course.
Well, the track.
But that's I mean, that's not just production music writers. That's the pop industry as a whole.
Yeah.
I think it's called the difficult second album, isn't it?
I had a question. I had a bunch. Okay, so do you think for musicians should target like big libraries like Universal and like the big ones, or go for boutique libraries first?
It's really simple. It's a really simple answer. It's a choice of whether you're a big fish in a little sea or a little fish in a big sea. There are pros and cons to both. You know, we're with Universal. It's the biggest music rights owner in the world, I believe. I think they currently stand at 500,000 tracks. It's sometimes easy to feel a bit lost in that, but the plus side is they have a big marketing machine worldwide. They have they have a big reach worldwide. If you're with the boutique library, you obviously get a better place on the bill and more attention. But if your boutique library is not getting through to customers, then there's not much point in being high up. I have to say, it's a question I think we ask ourselves daily, and we don't really have the answer. I think and also, I think it's fair to say that you maybe don't have a choice. You know, it's not like you're in a position to go, well, I'm only going to go with this sort of library or that sort of library. Certainly when you start out, it might be just a case of taking, you know, whoever will take you.
It's probably useful to point out that I think, as far as I know, in every single case, production music writers aren't tied to a specific publisher. When you sign over a piece of music, you literally sign over the rights of the music. You don't agree to write solely for that publisher. So, you know, if you get a deal for an album with Universal one week, and then another week you're offered a deal with a boutique label, well, go for it. You're able to do that. So it's difficult to...
Whilst that's totally legally correct, you obviously might some libraries might feel a little bit protective of you or snubbed. I mean, I think
that used to be the case much more when the libraries were small.
Well,
I think nowadays...
But I think what it may be is a one-way street. So and again, I don't want to quote anyone, but I'm guessing some of the bigger libraries are less bothered about that. But you might find that smaller boutique libraries are maybe a little bit funny about. You know, I don't know. We don't have experience of it, but people can make their own minds.
Well, we early on we did have experience of it,
well,
because we were writing for a library and we were approached by another library, and
it didn't go down
we
well.
thought, do we ask our first library and see what they said? And we decided we would do. We'd play the kind of fair game, and we were definitely slapped on the wrists and told not to do it. But I have to say, you know, we're talking, you know, 20 years ago.
But what I'm saying is we don't have experience of it now.
No,
I don't know.
Well, other than the only thing I would say is that I know a lot of writers who do write for a lot of different libraries, and I certainly recently I've never heard anyone say, oh, I got in trouble for doing this for this library when I was already doing stuff for. So I think it's generally accepted that the music business is a difficult business to get into, and you know, if you're writing good music for one library, that's great, they're happy with that, and you know, if you then write some tracks for another library, they're not going to.
I suspect it also comes down to the sort of thing you're doing. So if you did a very specific genre for one library and then an album of exactly the same genre
I think that's a
for
point,
you know, if you were writing one genre for Universal and say one genre for BMG or someone, I can imagine that wouldn't be particularly something they'd be happy about. But you know, if you're doing kids music for one library and opera for another, then
they wouldn't care. Yeah. Nice. We had a question about sampling, like musicians who use samples in their music when they submit albums for libraries. Clearly not.
Yeah, you can't use samples that haven't been cleared. That just isn't a thing. I mean, sampling is an interesting point actually with regard to library, and this is just an anecdote rather than a lot of the library music from way back in the 70s was actually sampled during the 90s and used. Some of the beats and things were used in chart tracks during the sort of 90s and early 2000s.
So, I mean, also, we just need to clarify what we're talking about with samples. So if we're talking about sample libraries, again, don't quote me, you need to check it yourself, but most commercial sample libraries are fine to use in library music. They get sometimes a bit funny about sort of having instruments too exposed, but generally, I think it's pretty much understood that library is such a big business now that sample libraries need to have their users' ability to put the music in the library. But then if you're talking about sampling of other people's tracks, you know, sampling drum beats and stuff, well, absolutely not. It's a complete no-no.
All right. I have so many questions. And like when an artist reaches a library, is it preferred for like the artist to send like one album that is done with a cover and like 10 finished tracks, or just send one track?
No,
and see?
I don't think so. I mean, you'd really have to check every individual library's submission requirements, but they will say something like send 2 tracks in maximum or 3 tracks maximum. Libraries are big businesses and they're quite well organized and they have a production schedule. So unless it's something very, very unique, I would have thought they're quite unlikely to just say, oh, great, that's an album, we'll just put that into our schedule. I think most libraries will have a schedule running 18 months ahead.
I'd have thought 2 or 3 tracks, and I'm guessing here, like Mark says, I haven't kind of looked at recently at what the submission kind of requirements are. But with regard to artwork and stuff, that they deal with all that, so you don't have to worry about any of that. It's literally just it would be.
But again, you know, on smaller libraries there may be different criteria, but any library will have its submissions criteria on its website.
All right. Another question is, when they use it for films, do you alter the music afterwards to fit the scenes better? Do you need to learn film score?
I think that's, I get where that's coming from. They may well be used just as they are. It's quite possible that the film people would approach you and say, can you do us a different mix of this or a different length or whatever? More often than not, a piece of music is just used as it is, but there have been occasions where we've been asked to alter tracks to suit the requirements of the, whatever the, whether it's an advert or, like you say, a film or whatever. And
now with people tending to provide stems, film editors have a bit more flexibility to modify the track themselves.
Yeah. It's also like, again, you mentioned that before, but when you write a track for library, it's usually you have a bunch of versions of the same track. So one with percussion, one without percussion. Yeah. So the editors can use what they prefer.
They could take the melodies off or the drums off and stuff like that.
And while we're on that topic, can you talk a little bit about flexi tracks and
so we're, as well as being composers, we actually have our own library music label as well, which is part of Universal. So that's quite common nowadays, is that big library music publishers will have what they call third-party labels. So in our case, and I think it's probably quite typical, we actually do our own artwork, and we're pretty much self-contained. We produce the music and we commission other people to write music for us as well, and then it goes out on the Universal website. And what we've done, and it leads on from the last question, is what we've done is we've actually added a further level of flexibility within the tracks, so that as well as having stems, we provide music in sections as well. As far as we know, we're the only people doing that, and it's quite early days, so only time will tell whether that's something that editors really take to. We're hopeful it will, and I mean, it's sort of slightly backtracking on a lot of things we've said previously, because as composers we didn't do marketing, but as label owners we do marketing, and Universal do that as well. But that is because it's a label with a brand that we're marketing, and it's also because it's a quite unique way of presenting music. There's an idea there to market, rather than just saying, oh, we've written some music, it's great, have a listen to it. We're actually presenting a new method of supplying music. But it's early days, it's fun, it's a lot of work. I think it's made us feel a little bit more charitable to the producers and publishers that we'd worked with in the past, and we now realize what a difficult bunch of so-and-so's composers are to work with. and
not all of them, Abed.
So it's made us feel a little bit more sympathetic, because running a label, there's a bit more to it than I think we thought at the beginning, but it's great that we end up with. We've become very good jugglers. We're juggling artwork and videos and tracks and trying to compose as well. But yeah, it's good fun. It's really good.
Yeah, that's like that. I wanted to ask you if you ever have do you still have time to compose, like with all that? Because it seems like a lot of work.
I haven't written a piece of music since the beginning of lockdown, but
you've been doing a fairly major. But I've been technical thing that we've been developing.
We have lots of different hats. So I'm international marketing director, and Andy's social media director, and
I've been doing a lot of the sort of production side as well. Yeah, but I keep saying to him that he needs to let go of some of these things, and we need to find someone else to do it so that we can get back. Because I think that's the worry, is that, I mean, it sounds pathetic to moan about it, but we have to be careful, because composing is what we love doing. That's what we
but I love doing the other stuff as well, and I think that's the joy of having a label, is that I've always liked doing a bit of art, and I know you have. So it's a chance to say, oh, I'm going to do a bit of art, and Andy loves the video making,
video editing. That's a whole new.
And it's great fun, and a bit of travel and go out. There is a risk being a composer that we kind of joked that we've been socially isolating for 30 years. So the lockdowns not been any different for us. Anything's changed, because you know, we've literally sat in front of this bank of monitors for 30 years. So it's, I love getting out and seeing people and yeah, meeting people that are using your music. It's great fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. How do you guys stay, like, when you have to write this, like, a huge amount of music? How do you stay creative? How do you, like, come with all these ideas for, like, new music? Do you, like, watch films?
Yeah,
It's the question we never ask ourselves.
yeah, that's a dangerous
Meditate.
exercise, isn't it? You
Take drugs.
You still can't do it. No, for me, it's listening to a lot of music. I have playlists on Spotify. It would have been cassettes or whatever, and just things that you kind of things that inspire you. You think, oh, I'd love to try making something like that. I think it's kind of having a really open mind in terms of the music that you'll listen to.
Yeah, I agree.
And you'll find, well, I do. I enjoy working on nearly every genre of music. I can't think of anything where I've not enjoyed working on it. So, you know, if you can keep an open mind and just enjoy what you're doing. So I'll have these tracks for inspiration, and I'll kind of just cherry pick one out, and I'll play it and listen to it. And you may start almost copying some element of it, but without doubt the music will kind of steer its own course and you get your own ideas, and that's how I work.
I think I'm going to say something that's very sort of, I don't know what the opposite of ageist is, but whatever it is, I'm going to say it. I think, as a general rule, when you're young, you're a little bit more narrow-minded about what music you're into. I think, you know, when I was young, and I think my kids who are teenagers, I mean, they're fairly broad-minded with the music, but probably partly because there's a lot of different music played in our house. But I think a lot of their friends would say, "Oh no, I'm into hip hop, and that's it," or "I'm you know, into R&B, and that's kind of all I listen to." And I think it's a great advantage, if not a necessity, if you're starting out and you're quite young, to be really broad in what you listen to. Try and go outside your natural preferences and really try and soak up lots of different music genres, because one thing is for certain, unless you are in the pop charts, you are going to have to do lots of different music to make a living from it. I think you'd be very, very fortunate if you said, well, I'm going to just do, you know, TV themes or library, and I'm only going to do grime, or I'm only going to do R&B. I think it would be unheard of. We can be doing a string quartet. I mean, we've been doing a string quartet last week, and we can be working on, you know, also
he was going to say hip hop then, but obviously we're way too old. We try.
But you know, we could be doing kids music about dancing with your pants on your head in the morning, and string quartet in the afternoon, a speed metal thing in the next day.
Nice.
And you know, a nursery rhyme. You've got to be broad, and I think that's part of the inspiration, is that by listening to just lots of, I'm like Andy, I just listen to Spotify, I go, oh, I'd like to do a piece of music like that, I really like that, let's crowbar an album out like that. I mean, that's the joy of having your own label. It's like having your own sweet shop. You can say, oh, you know, I'd love to do a French gypsy jazz album. Well, let's do it. Let's put it in the schedule.
And that's like the best way to like better your skills. Like, it's like being a guitar player or a piano player. You don't just play heavy metal all your life. Like, you have to learn blues, you have to learn some classical music, jazz, maybe. Oh,
yeah, you haven't heard my heavy metal skills on the piano, though, Ahmed. You'd never want me to play anything else if you.
The point is, all the genres of music involve skill, you know, and if you can stand back and look at those skills that are being used and admire them for what they are, you can then see the challenges involved in trying to write music in that style. And then, you know, rather than saying, oh, I hate country and western music, it's rubbish, you listen to it, you think, well, actually, that's, you know, they're doing some really clever stuff there, let's have a go at that. You learn respect for all the different styles of music, and then it becomes a real joy to write in different styles.
One of the things that we did many years ago, I'm going to say 20, maybe 25 years ago, is we got involved with a company where we were doing karaoke backing tracks.
That was a high point.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was fantastic because it was a stream of income that enabled us to give up our day jobs. It was like an extra guarantee of, I don't know, maybe £200 a week or something, where it wasn't guaranteed, but it was definitely quite a steady thing. And, you know, we laugh about it now, but it was such a brilliant learning curve, because you were taking the latest pop tracks and we were deconstructing them, and we had I think we had a day to do each one.
Wow.
And, you know, and these pop tracks probably took 3 weeks to record, and we were having to deconstruct them and find out how they did it. And it was such a brilliant
it was
a great experience.
That's
so amazing. Again, if people have got time on their hands and they want to develop their production skills, you know, it's a great way. Listen deep and deconstruct and see. I remember there were 2 library writers who wrote for Universal some years ago, who we were quite friendly with, and they were really into Pink Floyd, and they couldn't work out how Pink Floyd had got some of their sounds. And they did a brilliant, really clever thing. They switched off their left and right speakers one by one, so they could hear what was coming out of separate speakers. And then they realized that there were sounds that were made up of 2 different sounds. But when you were listening on the 2 speakers, you couldn't tell how they were getting that effect. But once you isolated the speakers, you saw what the combination was. And it's little things like that. I love that sort of thing.
And I mean, the huge advantage is there's so much stuff on YouTube now that you can get people, they show you how they do things. So, you know, I mean,
can I just say as well, I think it's quite important. We don't stand up here as kind of top end producers. And I don't think even top end composers.
Well, he can speak for himself.
But you know, we're not at the cutting edge of pop production or anything like that. You know, we create everything ourselves, so we learn a bit about production. And I mean, Andy's background's more in recording engineering, and mine's more in sort of formal music training and stuff, and that all comes together. But you know, we're by no means standing up here as the zenith of production or engineering. We just do, you know, good composition, good engineering, good production, and throw it all together. And I think you're not got to get too obsessed about, you know, being the loudest track or the cleanest track or the biggest. It's about the combination of good writing, sensible engineering, and good production. And it's, you know,
I mean, it's a good point, because it's totally possible to do it at home as well. It doesn't have to be done in a big studio. I mean, there are a lot of library tracks that are recorded in top-end studios. When there are a lot done with full orchestras and the kind of full-on production. Yeah. But equally, there are very successful writers working in a small bedroom-style studio. You know, for want of a better.
Just on the MacBook.
Yeah.
With some
the technology has made it. You know, it's democratized the whole thing.
Yeah, like even today, it's not just with the library music, but also on top charts music, like the Billie Eilish album.
I was just going to say, Billie Eilish is a great example. Yeah.
Bedroom, you know.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about like genre specifically. Do you have like any recommendations for the people who are listening from the Middle East and Palestine about like writing in a specific genre? Maybe like writing Middle Eastern hip hop, or just focusing on hip hop, you know?
Well, I think the thing to do is check out the libraries and see if they've got loads of a certain genre. Then obviously there's going to be more competition and less likelihood of whatever you submit being noticed or kind of accepted, as it were. But if, you know, there is no Middle Eastern hip hop in the libraries, then go for it. You know, there's a market for everything. What you ideally, if you find a niche that you can kind of grab the attention of the producers at the library, then and kind of once your foot's through the door, once you've got a track or two that they've released, they know who you are, they know you can do it, and you can then approach them for other work. But yeah, I would definitely look for areas that you think that you can do that are perhaps underrepresented on the the libraries. I mean, that's probably quite a tall order. I would definitely go in with what you're strongest at the moment, you know. So if, for example, you've concentrated on a specific genre of music, it would be probably foolish to try and do something completely different if if it's not your strength. But you know, you just have a look at what's out there,
and of course, there's absolutely nothing to stop you approaching production music companies all over the world, and certainly with Middle Eastern music. You know, the Middle East isn't the only market for Middle Eastern music. It's a huge genre throughout the world, because so many programs in the United States and in Europe being made on topics concerning the Middle East, and you know, so there's
and in every
markets.
Respect as well. It'd be and right, you know, from holidays through to news. You know, it's that kind of whole spectrum of uses.
So just because production music may not be an established business in the Middle East, it doesn't mean there's not a market for it. And that goes the same for, you know, Southeast Asian music and Chinese and stuff. We live in a very globalized media business now. So, yeah, but I think I agree with Andy, just focusing on your strengths, and like any other business, look at what's out there and see if you can find some gaps. And it may be that one publisher is well furnished with your genre, and it may be that another publisher is not. And sell yourself to them. Say, you know, I don't think you've got this genre particularly well represented on your label. Here it is. And certainly from our experience as very new label owners, you know, that's exactly the sort of thing you are looking for.
I should say another really important thing is for publishers is reliability, and kind of, so, you know, stress to them that you're gonna, you know, if you write for them, you will meet schedules, and make sure you do meet schedules. It's really, really important. I mean, this has been, as Mark said, it's been a really interesting learning curve for us, because we've had to deal with lots of new musicians. Some of them we knew already, some of them are new to us, and you very quickly find that some of them are absolutely red hot in efficiency, and others aren't. And the ones who aren't become a nuisance to work with in some ways, because you're constantly chasing them. So there's a disproportionate amount of time spent with some composers, and that, you know, then you're not going to get employed by people if that's how you operate. So you know, you've got to be businesslike about it.
I mean, the fact is there are vastly more composers than publishers. So publishers are in the driving seat. And I mean, I remember years ago, someone at Universal just said, well, we don't work with people we don't like. We don't have to work with people we don't like. And the same will go for reliability. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you promise stuff and then don't show up with it, you just won't get used again. So, I mean, it's not very rock and roll, but we've always tried to keep a pretty business-like schedule. You know, we start at maybe 9 or 9:30 and work through till 5 or 6, partly because then we can be contacted and we can contact people. We don't, it's not a kind of a night hawk business for us. We keep a pretty regular business day, and we meet our schedules. I don't think we've ever missed a deadline, because it's like any other business. If you promise something, you've got to deliver it, and you've got to be professional. You know, if people, you've got to be able to take criticism. That's something, you know, it's not easy.
That's a really good point, actually, and this is where working as a writing partnership, criticism is much easier to deal with when there are two of you,
except from each other. And then it's particularly painful.
No, but so working on your own as a composer, if you're criticised, you've got you've got no one else who's worked on that piece of music with you
that you can blame.
You kind of it's difficult. You're taking knocks on the chin that are quite difficult. So I mean, that's just our experience, and I know other pairs of writers who would agree with that, and other individual writers who would also agree with it from the downside. So I mean, but you do have to take criticism. A useful thing to do is, when you've received a piece of criticism, don't respond to it straight away. because nearly always your response will be one of kind of anger or frustration. So just don't write that email. Well, you can write the email, but don't send it. Look at it the next morning. And
we find it very cathartic to actually write a furious email.
Yeah.
It's normally about budgets rather than critique, actually.
Well,
But so we write these furious emails, and then we go, right, park that for the night. And then come back in the morning when we've calmed down and go, glad we didn't send it.
Okay, then don't read my last email. One last question that I can think of is, what about like music that has been released previously? Like a lot of independent artists do great music, put it on YouTube or like streaming services, and like it's over there. Can they use that same music that wasn't released by a label?
Yeah. So long as it's not tied up with a publisher, yes, they can use it. They'd probably have to take it down off whatever they've put it on, so they'd have to take it off YouTube or whatever streaming service. But yes, they could reuse it.
I mean, just on that subject, we've encountered a couple of situations where composers, new composers for us, have expressed surprise that once a piece of music has been signed over to us, they can't still create an independent income stream from it. They've sort of said, well, surely I can still keep this and release it as a track. Well, you can't. It's signed over to a publisher. The publisher might release it as a track with you, but you can't register a track with one publisher and then another publisher, certainly not without their agreement.
Yeah.
But like you say, there's no problem to release stuff. It's a recycling thing again. But it's just a case of whether it's already signed elsewhere.
It's worth mentioning that the contract that you would sign for a piece of production music is significantly different to a commercial release. Commercial releases, more often than not, the publishing will be only for a certain length of time and various other kind of negotiable sides to it. Whereas,
and it will have, sorry to interrupt you, it will also have the mention of selling physical units and things like that, which library music almost never has, unless it's very, very occasionally a library track might get picked up on a compilation album for a TV program, but I'm not sure it's ever happened to us with several hundred library tracks. So I think that sometimes takes composers by surprise a bit. They go, well, it's not like the record contract I had. There's no mention of this, and what do you mean it's for infinity? Well, that's the way it works. Yeah,
that's just the way the business works. But it's something to be aware of and check it out. Don't just sort of assume it's the same sort of thing. But it's been our world and it's served us well. So
and do you think would be better for artists to go with deals that they offer down payment per album, or just that they take a bigger share? Like,
getting rarer and rarer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Well, it's a changing world with library deals, and I don't want to go into too many specifics here, but basically because some libraries are offering deals that don't carry mechanical royalty. It's a more sort of a subscription basis, and so libraries that don't run that situation, that setup, are having to do different deals with composers where mechanical royalties may not be included, or they may be reduced. It's for another webinar, that, and it's quite a complex technical situation. And in some cases, the lack of mechanical royalties is being compensated more by an upfront payment. In some cases, the presence of a mechanical royalty will now mean that you don't get any upfront. We couldn't comment on what's better. That would be a judgment for composers, and it would be between them and their individual libraries. But I think what I'm trying to get at, it's a bit more of a competitive world now that there are different royalty models out there.
Well, anyone who follows on Instagram, you'll be seeing royalty-free music popping up all the time. There are a lot of now quite big companies doing royalty-free music, so they're directly competing with the traditional production music libraries. I think most of their aim is at the social media side of things at the moment. So that's where they're kind of focusing. But it's having a big impact on the traditional production music libraries. So the whole business is becoming more competitive from the publisher's point of view, which ultimately, unfortunately, means that the composers are being squeezed more in terms of upfront money and the royalty splits and things. So it's something to be aware of, and unfortunately, it is something where there is an increasing amount of pressure on companies to sort of remain profitable, and so I like everything nowadays. You only have to look at companies like Amazon kind of crushing all the smaller guys. You have to remain competitive in some way, and it's for you to make the judgment as to whether there's an unreasonable amount of work being asked of you for the potential return. So
well, we're done with the time, but I wanted to ask you about Audio Jungle, but I'll leave that to our next webinar.
What was that when you wanted to ask us?
About Audio Jungle and like libraries like Audio Jungle?
Is that like the Audio Network or?
Audio Jungle, it's like the, they started, I think, a few years ago. It's like where they offer music like really, really cheap, and they have like any artist can upload their music over there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not something we have a great deal of experience of, but I think it's included in that area.
Yeah.
And we said that it's competition, and I'm absolutely not going to sit here and slag it off. It's a different model. This on all of these platforms, there's good music, and it's just the model you choose. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's time. It's not what we do. It's a competitor, but competition is healthy. Without competition, there wouldn't be FlexiTracks, because FlexiTracks was born out of trying to provide a service that didn't exist. And whether it is a great success or not, we hope, and we're working hard, but there's no guarantees. But you try and evolve to compete and survive.
Great. Do you have anything to say to the artists who are watching?
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. I think.
Yeah, keep at it. Or take advantage of any opportunities that come your way, because there's a lot of luck involved. And when we look back at our careers, there have been kind of pivotal moments which seemed insignificant at the time, but we made the right choice. Take advantage of anything that's kind of offered you in terms of opportunities. Get on with people, be businesslike, and enjoy your music. That's right.
Yeah. And I think, be patient.
Yeah.
It's a long haul. And I think, and again, I don't want to sound gloomy, but I don't think there's any point in my career where for any length of time I've thought, well, that's it, I've arrived. Yeah. I've just, I've got to the pinnacle of my career and I've made it. We're knocking on a bit now, and I still feel like I'm forging my career. So but that's the joy. It wouldn't be fun for long if you thought, well, I've reached the peak of it. It's always about just pushing forward and just, as Andy said, the most important thing is to enjoy it, but to be patient, work hard, and appreciate it's going to take some time. And I mean, there's never a point where the phone just rings itself and we're just overburdened with work all the time. There's just a constant push and constantly working hard, and that's the fun of it.
Yeah. And just start working, put your music out there, reach out to people, get whatever deal you get. If it's exclusive, not exclusive, the first thing comes your way, do it. And just put your step in the door, take that first step, and then
definitely
build from there.
Can I just say one thing that is actually quite important on this? There's a fine line between, and it's a line that we've trod throughout our career. There's a fine line between doing stuff cheaply to actually get work, that maybe leads to more work. There's a fine line between that and long-term undermining your value.
Oh yeah.
And this is really quite a big point. So what happens was a lot of the TV stations for years behaved very honorably and had a set amount that they would pay for their music. And it's not a dig at the TV stations, because it's every business in every walk of life. You know, as things get tougher and more competitive, they think, well, we'll see if we can get things done a bit cheaper. And because music is such a desirable career to get into, for every person that says, well, it's £1,000 to write a theme tune, there's someone who says, well, I'll do it for 500. And for every person that says that 500, there's someone who'll do it for 100. And for every person that says they'll do it for 100, there's 1,000 people that will do it for free. Because it's getting a foot in the door or a foot on the ladder. But you have to be careful, because if you do that too much, you undermine your ability to earn anything in the future. Now, we've definitely done this where you think, well, I'll do a bit of a favor, or I'll do it a bit cheaper to get in with this producer. Yeah. But what almost invariably has happened is that the producer comes back to you and says, well, I'd like you to do another piece of music. And we go, all right, well, now it's going to cost the proper rate. And they go, well, I don't really want to pay the proper rate. So if you won't do it for what you did last time, we'll go somewhere else. So you actually end up sort of, it's like they call it a race to the bottom.
Yeah, it's a very difficult call as well, because there have been occasions where we have done things a little bit cheaper just to kind of get in with the producer, and then later on it's led to well-paid jobs. So it's a very difficult call, and you
can't lecture people, say you mustn't do stuff on the cheap, because you know, people do need to start and get in. Exactly. If everyone can just be quite careful that it's very unlikely, if you do something on the cheap, that people are going to come back and not expect to pay the same price or go somewhere else where they get on. You should
always bear that in mind.
But good luck, everybody. And
thank you so much. Like, it was absolutely amazing talking to you guys. Like, really, thank you.
No, it's always been great to find someone to listen to us.
Sure. And I'll, like, for the people who are listening to us, if you have any questions, you can hit us on Facebook, Instagram. You can email me, like, anything you need, I can hook you up. And
we're very happy to answer anything via email. That's never a problem.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.